So, Buck, it's always good for us to get together and have these updates. I
Sure.
know. Yep, absolutely. And how are you doing today?
Very good, very good. In fact, I had to come out because there's something going on at the office. So came out in my car to chat with you.
Well, that goes to show the importance of keeping in touch. So, thank you.
No question about it.
Buck, for the last in fact, the last two sessions, we
Yep.
talked a lot about this regulation, the NCUA 748, and
Hmm.
the impact that this regulation has on credit unions. So just if you could just briefly explain what this is again, just in case somebody is watching this for the first time, because in our conversation today, we're going to talk about the seriousness and the importance of this regulation, and then what credit unions community banks really need to do in order to make sure that they are protected. So at least an overview of what this is would be helpful.
Sure. So what we spoke last two times, Wayne, one is, the obligations that a credit union has for member data confidentiality. And that is very, very serious obligation, no matter whether you are a one branch credit union or whether you are the Navy Federal. It is the same responsibility that you have. Obviously, it falls on the shoulders of the board of directors. And as we discussed earlier, board of directors of a credit union are, very strong local community leaders most of the time. They know what's going on, they know what to do. But when it comes to regulations and information security and confidentiality and all that stuff, sometimes they need some help to, kind of lay it out for them. And how to, I mean, credit unions don't come with, Bank of America kind of budgets, right? So how can they do that? Not only do that, sustain that, and achieve all this in a very, very low price point. So these are some of the important challenges that we spoke about. And then we said NCUA, National Credit Union Administration, is the government body that is tasked with oversight of credit unions. But they've got a whole big regulation, the CFRs, and one of them, 748 specifically, that I keep talking about,
Yep.
is about what is the credit union's obligation to maintain a security program in the credit union, so that when NCUA auditors or anybody else comes, or even a member comes and says that, hey, show me how you protect my data, and they need to be able to give a good answer to that. So that's what NCUA 748 asking us. And then we spoke about, how people can actually achieve that. That is what, in fact, today we'll probably focus more on.
That's right. And so, Buck, I think that's a good segue. Because once understanding what the regulation is and understanding why that's important. In fact, last week I participated in a webinar having to do with cybersecurity and the
Mm-hmm.
impact of what organizations need to do to mitigate, some of the threat with regards to cybersecurity. One of the points that came up is that this is something that anyone involved in financial services and otherwise need to be very aware of the
Yep.
threats that
Yep.
that exist. So speaking about the NCUA 748, perhaps maybe for our listeners, kind of walk through what's necessary. What do they need to do, in order to make this more actionable?
Okay. Okay. I can speak on this for whole day, Wayne.
but
But
you'll give us the bite-sized piece.
normally we do like 10 to 12 minutes. Can
Mm-hmm.
we do like maybe about 15 minutes today?
Sure. Let's kind of walk through, and then we'll make this a dialogue so that there's some
Sure.
feedback, so that those
Okay.
those who listen in can really get
Mhm.
the maximum benefit of what this is going to mean.
Right. So first we have spoken, Wayne, as you remember, is the regulation itself. So as you can you see my screen?
I can.
Yeah. So as you can see, I'm just typing in Google NCUA 748. Okay. And let us see what we get. So if you look at this very first, right, it is ecfr.gov, Code of Federal Regulations, and Chapter 7 is for credit unions. And in that, you can see this 748. So you can see, everybody can see clearly, right? Code of
Mm-hmm.
Federal Regulations. That is the website, which is a government website. So this is the regulation is. So you can see Part 748, Security Program, Report of Suspected Crimes, Suspicious Transactions. Like you have got a member, who is, let us say, running a bagel shop or running a laundromat in your community. And suddenly he walks in one day and makes a $50,000 cash deposit. So it's clearly a suspicious transaction. And the credit union is required to do something about it. Analyze that transaction, maybe ask a question to the member, And then if something is not satisfactorily explained, they're required to report it. It's called a SAR, Suspicious Activity Report. And you can see here very clearly, I'll in fact spend 30 seconds on point A itself, Wayne. Each federally insured credit union will develop a written security program within 90 days of the effective date of insurance. Now you can easily see the importance of this, Wayne, right?
Yep.
You are a federally insured credit union and you received federal insurance, of course, 20, 30, 40 years ago. But what you are required to do is develop a effective written security program. Okay.
So Buck, that's a quick question. So this is really important. So we're assuming that the organization has this security program that's already in place.
Yes.
However, if one is not in place, or if it's not finalized, what's the potential risk?
What is written very clearly here, that if you don't have, what does it mean, Wayne? That your federal insurance may be at risk if you don't have. So what can be more serious for a credit union, right?
Right, right. So I wanted to really bring that point out for our listeners to really understand.
Yep.
You know, it's great that we can walk through and just assume, but sometimes with the day to day, it's hard to kind of just focus. Maybe not be able to focus on even crafting this document, or maybe it's not complete. But a nice point that's mentioned here.
They've got lots of bits and pieces, but one single document as a security program is what the government is expecting you to have.
Okay, perfect.
Let us look at section B. Some very critical points here when we can quickly see. First one is protect credit union office from robberies, burglaries, larcenies, and embezzlement. So you can see this goes into two directions. One is the physical security. How is your locking of the premises? Do you have CCTV? How do you record, people walking in, walking out, all kinds of things. And of course, then embezzlement, which can be a fraud by an outsider, fraud by an insider, fraud assisted by an insider, all kinds of possibilities. Second one, ensure the security and confidentiality of member records. This is the holy grail, Wayne, really. Member records are sacrosanct, and credit union is absolutely obligated to ensure its security and confidentiality, right? So there are so many of these things, but before we go to the next, let me just say one thing. If you look at point B5, prevent destruction of vital records. So you are required to make sure that those records are securely stored. They are not just wiped out by mistake from your hard disk, or from your vendor's hard disk, or this or that. And these are the kind of things. So what we can do, Wayne, today, because we have got very limited time, let us pick on point B2, ensure the security and confidentiality of member records. Okay. Now, as you can see, you can think of 100 different things that you need to do for ensuring security and confidentiality of your members' records that you have with you. Okay. So how do you really start? Where do you start? That's the big question, right?
That's right.
How do you write your security program? So I keep talking about the NIST IT controls register all the time. So we'll go there and we'll do the same thing. We will not talk from my imagination or experience. We will bring up exactly what the regulation is and what exactly is supposed to happen. So you can see here. Yep. Again, I'll make sure that people see the website. It is csrc.nist.gov. So it's a government website where this whole document has been uploaded. And I load the specific document. As you can see, it's almost a 500-page document. So not something that people can easily chew and do something about it. So we have seen, Wayne, that in the NCUA 748, we just picked on one point. We said that we want to make sure that member data security and confidentiality is maintained. So now let us bring that point into what the government is giving us help through this document. So the NIST document is telling us that, look, there are 20 control families that we have defined, and you can understand each one of these so that you can design your security program in a proper and logical way that your auditor can understand and appreciate, rather than throwing some 20 different pieces of security at him or her, which do not, connect well with each other. Is it making sense?
It really is. So to me, the way that this analogy is, it is just an analogy with when it comes to the regulations. It's almost as if you're building a house, right? So you're building a foundation, you're putting all the layers, you're making sure that that structure is strong, and as you build from having a good foundation, and then what you've walked through is what that foundation needs to be.
Exactly.
And so the real responsibility would really be on the credit union, making sure that they have all the pieces that are going to be necessary in order to be in compliance, obviously with the NCUA 748. So it's not something that they have to wonder. It's almost like this is a construction guide or a guide to a
Absolutely.
recipe of what's necessary.
100%. And under these 20 control families, there are more than 1,000 controls. So let me say this only this much way right now so that people get the right perspective. We spoke of like Navy Federal Credit Union, right? Like
As
a
an
big,
example. That was only as an
big,
example.
yeah, absolutely. A big credit union. So they require all these 20 control families, all 1,000 controls, because their operations are huge. But you can't expect a 2 or 3 branch credit union to have the resources and expertise to implement all those 1,000 controls. So they can pick and choose based on their operations, what exactly is relevant to them at this point. So when you talk about member data confidentiality, the first and foremost you can think of is the very first family called access control, right? You see that on the screen, the first one?
I do.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. Number one, AC.
AC, that's right. So you go into AC, there are many controls that government has defined for you. Let us take a simple example. I mean, this is very large, but I'm like kind of simplifying that today for our discussion. So for example, one control is automated system account management. So do you have a way of automatically, controlling the email IDs and access rights that you give to your employees and stop them when they don't need it anymore? Or how do you give it to a new employee when he or she joins? All kinds of things. The second control is about automated temporary and emergency account manager. In fact, as we speak, when I'm literally imagining sitting in a credit union with the CEO or the chief operating president, and these are exactly what we discuss with each one of them. That let us say you have got a printer in your office or something, and something is not wrong, so something is not right, so you call the service guy, service technician is there. He says, hey, I need to access your computer to fix something in your network, printer configuration, stuff like that. So you need to give me a temporary access to your network, right? So how do you give temporary access to somebody, and how do you make sure that as soon as that person is done with that work, his or her access is terminated? That access should not remain on forever.
That's true. That's a good point.
Yep. And that's what happens many times when, I'm sorry to say that, but many times access is given, but access is not taken back.
Yes, very true. And that could even include emails that are not terminated, right? So
all kinds,
or physical control, right? So that's something that these controls and these processes need to be put into place so that there's a responsibility, as well as these are part of the procedures that can be reviewed and updated. And so somebody can view them internally to make sure that they are in compliance, so that when a third party steps in, that these points are met, right? So that makes a lot of sense.
Exactly. Third one is, for example, disable account. So like an employee has left, an employee has retired. So how do you make sure that his or her accounts, email, computer access, application access, printer access, check printer access, all kinds of things, how do you ensure that it has all been disabled in time? Right. So you can go on like this, automated audit actions, inactivity. Nowadays, when everywhere people say that if somebody is not doing anything on his or her screen for, let us say, 3 minutes or 4 minutes, the person should be logged out forcibly, because the person may have, gone for a coffee, gone to the restroom, whatever, and if the screen is on, maybe somebody else can do something very quickly before that person comes back. So now we don't need to go into all these details, but what I want to bring up is Are you able to see, Wayne, that one simple statement in that security program of NCUA 748, maintain member data security, how it has been broken down into 20 different points here that give you very specific idea about what is it that you need to do. So you've
No,
got a
that makes
starting point. You've got a
right.
starting point.
This information is really good. But I would say in the real life situation,
Mhm.
does a credit union organization go through this regulation and then build those procedures internally based on this regulation? Kind of walk through, Buck, how do you see this regulation being complied with in the real life, in the real world?
Yeah. So yes, again, a very large bank, a very large credit union will have the people, a compliance department, security department. They will study all these things. They've got people who are like CISAs and all kinds of expertise is there. They will probably be geared to understand these things and design their own controls around each one of them. But that is not what happens for, I would say, 95% of the credit unions. They don't have the people, they don't have the resources, they don't have the expertise. So for them, obviously, this 500-page document is too large to digest and come up with some meaningful, usable, solution out of it. So I'll walk you through what I do sometimes, and please don't take this as any, you know, uh, marketing effort or anything. But as in the topic comes, I think it's very logical for us to show people what are the different approaches possible to, get some help in these areas, right? So we have seen NCUA, the first regulation. We are now seeing NIST, control families and control register, which tells you what controls you can implement to achieve a specific goal that NCUA has put in front of you. And now you can use the third piece in case you are a small or a mid-sized credit union and don't have a lot of expertise to do these things on your own. So for example, this is an application that I use often with my customers, credit unions, banks, and even other people who. So I'll take an example today. So this is an application. What it is showing you, if you see the diagram at the bottom, it is telling you which controls have been selected for your credit union. So as I said earlier, you might be a small credit union and you don't want to directly start with 1000 controls and start doing it every day. You don't have the resources to do that. So I will help you select some controls for you to get going with, like we saw access control, auditing, and configuration management, contingency planning, some important ones you pick up and you start building your. So the way this looks is something like this. We have all the 20 families, but I'm saying that for this particular credit union, which has got 3 4 branches, 50 employees, small one, I'm saying that okay, you don't need to start with all 20. Maybe you don't need to right away jump into physical and environmental protection, because basically your applications are run by somebody else. You have got a vendor doing all that for you. You don't have any in-house big IT team that runs a data center and stuff like that. So you, for to begin with, keep this control away from you. Don't waste time on this. Maybe you don't need to do planning right now. Maybe you don't need to do PII processing. But what you need to do is make sure that you have got some good access control. You have got some good awareness and training for your employees. You have got assessments. You have got configuration management. So out of 20, as you can see here, Win, we are just selecting some 7 8 controls that are a good starting point for a small or mid-sized credit union. Okay. And then within that, what you do is, the way this works. So let us say I select access control, because we are talking about access control today. So let us continue with the same example. So access control has got, as we saw, let us say 7 control under that policy. What is your access control policy? What do you do about account management? How do you enforce access control? and segregation of duties. So for example, you don't want somebody approving a payment to a vendor also be able to write and sign the check, right? So
Absolutely.
this
Yeah, absolutely. That's one-on-one auditing for sure.
exactly, and auditor is going to ask for it. So
Right.
having a formal control like this, segregation of duties, is something that allows you to make sure that that control is there and that control is implemented. Okay.
No, this is really good. But kind of walk through. Obviously, we understand what this could do. We understand the importance of the regulation. We understand the responsibility for a credit union to make sure that they're in compliance.
Mhm.
But kind of walk through some of the challenges, because obviously a small credit union may have some challenges to kind of keep up with the regulation, kind of keep up with what the
Yeah.
procedures, what they need to do in order to implement. Can you kind of walk through some of your thoughts that would help a credit union, a smaller credit union, to be
Mhm.
able to ensure that they
Yep.
are in a level of compliance?
Right. See, a small or mid-sized credit union has, you know, constraints on all fronts, resources, budgets, expertise, whatever. But there is one thing in which I have not found a credit union wanting so far, and that is the commitment of their board of directors and their president or COO or CEO in terms of making sure that what is right is done. Their commitment to that is always there. What they don't have is the tools and resources to make sure that they are able to actually do it on an everyday basis. The commitment is there, the desire is there, but the tools are not there. That's the only problem I can say in my experience of 10, 12 years now.
Okay, okay. Buck, in conclusion, can you walk through, with some of the things that you have developed and that
Mhm.
you have
Yep.
built in order to help credit unions to be able to ensure that they are in a level of compliance? And then as you kind of walk through what you've built, keep in mind to share why that's important. Why that's
Absolutely.
important.
Yeah. So let us continue with the same example logically. The regulation is asking you to make sure that you keep your member data confidential.
Mhm.
NIST is giving you a set of controls that you can implement to make sure that you are able to implement those controls. So now what is left, Wayne, is the president or the board director of a credit union having a tool in their hand to actually do it. And this is the tool. Like, for example, what I do is that, look, I explain to those people what the controls are, what is the importance of segregation of duties, what is the importance of least privilege, all kinds of things, unsuccessful logon attempts. So if somebody has typed a wrong password 5 times consecutively while trying to log on, there is a good chance that there is something wrong there. Why would a person not remember his or her own password for 5 times? So if you see the last line here, AC7, I ask them to keep track of unsuccessful logon attempts.
Oh, very good. Very smart.
Yeah. Hmm. And then what I do is I don't ask my board of directors or the president to go into any technical stuff. The systems most of the time are able to generate the logs. Like if you are using a third party core banking, like Pfizer or any of those mature platforms, they do everything. They provide you the logs, they provide you all the reports and all kinds of stuff. Your challenge is to make sure that it is actually done on a daily basis.
Okay.
So to serve that purpose, what I do, I design forms for people. Like you can see here, the list that you see right now is a list of forms, and I automatically email people. Like let us say this form number 2, for example, AC2, and I'm calling it, the form type is evidence. So new or current employee granted privileged access. So what I'm asking my president to do, president of the credit union to do, is that anytime there is an employee who has been given a different kind of access in the network, a privileged access, what we call, I tell them simply go into this system, fill up a form, simple one line, that so and so date, so and so time, special access was given to John Smith. It was approved by the president of the credit union, and the access was given specifically for the purpose of managing the MIS system. Okay, so just go there and fill up this form. It stays in the system. Next one, I'll take another example just to reinforce the point. Cashier's segregation, SOD stands for segregation of duties. So cashier's segregation of duty from vendor payment, we just spoke about it, right? So anytime you have got a cashier in a system, how do you make sure that that person does not have any other kind of access that allows that person to potentially perform any abusive activity? So what the president, see, president knows what to do when, that's not the problem. He or she knows what needs to be done. All we are talking about is providing them a very easy to use and inexpensive tool to make sure that it is done.
So, Buck, it's good to kind of walk through what you have done, a nice summary. But I think we need to let the audience know that may have questions, right, on how they need to do this. What tools are in place to help them automate this? What tools are available? As we wind down our discussion, can you share briefly of some very specific tools that are available to help those within the credit union organization to administer as well as to ensure that they're in compliance with the NCUA 748?
Yep, absolutely. So what they have to do, like this tool that we are seeing right now on the screen, it is uploaded on a public cloud as a SaaS solution. So they can easily use that. They don't have to buy or license any hardware, software. They don't have to hire any people. They don't have to hire any consultants. So they can get off the ground very quickly and in a very inexpensive manner. That's the most important thing. And everything is stored in the cloud very, very securely. And I can explain that as well as we go forward in maybe future sessions. And all this is kept. So what I do is at the end of it all, Wayne, all these forms I keep accumulating in the system. Whenever a form is not filled up in the required time frame, people will get automatic email reminders saying that, hey, this form is pending, this form is pending. They can keep making sure they're up to date. The whole idea is when the auditor walks in, you are just going to go to the system and create a PDF of all the evidence forms that you have gathered in last 6 months, last 1 year, put it in front of the auditor, and believe me, Wayne, 70% of your audit is done the moment you put it in front of an auditor, because more than anything else, the auditor wants to know, do you have, a handle on what you are supposed to do? Finding a mistake here, finding a mistake there, that comes much later. The first thing is, do you have a platform? Do you have a process to make sure that you are compliant? And this tool can do that for them in absolutely ready-made and inexpensive manner. Most important, they don't have to hire expensive IT consultants. They don't need to hire any IT people, just business people, the presidents, the boards, and maybe 2 or 3 senior staff members. And once they understand how this system works, what is the logic of this system, they just keep, I've got people, customers who will, keep feeding 10, 12, 20 forms every day, every branch. In fact, I had told a credit union that, maybe once in a week, every Friday afternoon or so, you review your CCTV logs and just fill a form here that, yes, I checked my logs, everything is good. There was no forced access. There was no unauthorized access into my office anywhere. We decided that they will do it once in a week, but you know what? They do it every day.
Okay.
Because once they see the benefit, once they see how it helps them, they go out of their way to use it to the fullest possible extent.
Okay. So, Buck, in conclude, what are your, and you, I think we've provided a good overview today, unless you have some additional points.
No, I will say only this one. This is much bigger. I have presented this in a very oversimplified way. But you have got customers, you have got a lot of networks on the credit union side, not just credit unions. I will say any other bank, and equally important, maybe even fintechs. Fintechs need to know this because they have to ultimately satisfy the banking customer. If you have got a great product, but if it does not meet the compliance obligations of your bank customer, it's not going to go into production. No way.
I think in a summary, in conclusion, what are some of the key things that are learning that this program, right, has helped, and how can credit unions really benefit by kind of automating the process? And I think that, what are some next steps or some additional thoughts that you can think of as we wind down our discussion for today?
Yeah. As an executive, I will ask everyone to do one thing first: understand 748 NIST and the link between them, and then start figuring out what out of that you need to kick off your own security program effort.
Mm-hmm.
That is clear to you. There are a lot of tools that can help you. Like I showed you my tool just now.
As we continue to get some feedback from the credit unions, community banks, and fintechs, as this information is published, I think that would be a good next step to kind of talk with them one-on-one about
Yep.
what they're doing, what they're seeing, where their gaps are, and then where this tool can kind of come in and kind of fill the gap.
Right. In fact, you shared so many comments and feedback that you got on our previous two sessions, and I hope some of them at least we were able to answer today. As usual, feel free to share, and I will do my best to answer them.
I think that's excellent. I think one of the things that this conversation today had helped, it helped to identify a little bit more detail of the NCUA 748. We're able to get a broad brush, what opportunities can exist, and with very little effort, what could be done so that the credit unions can make sure that they're in compliance in a way that makes sense for them. So I think that's great.
Yeah, and one point I'll add in quickly: compliance is definitely something that bothers people. It takes a lot of time, effort. But I will say one thing: when I've done this for so many credit unions and banks and other businesses, and look at compliance as your ally, look at your compliance as your competitive advantage. Don't look at something that you have to do just because you are obligated to do.
That's a good
It's
point.
it's a huge competitive advantage if you are confident about your compliance.
Absolutely. But I think I look forward to the next time. I know these are three conversations so far, but when I'm thinking about listening to hearing what you're actually saying, I think the next step would actually be a session with credit unions around this particular issue to get at this particular point, the NCUA 748 and what they're doing, and really be able to help credit unions to make a difference. Automation is here to stay. And what you have developed in automating the process, right? Very, very helpful to the credit unions so that they could see how they can be efficient in what they are going to do as far as the compliance on their side. Any concluding thoughts, Buck, that you want to share with the audience?
Two thoughts. I will repeat them because I can repeat them for One is understand 748 properly and build your security program around that. And B, look at compliance as your ally in growing your business and not as a threat or risk to your business.
You know what, Buck? I think that's a consistent theme, and I think also the mere fact that you were able to share your expertise in this to the audience in ways that they can benefit, I think was excellent. So thanks again for your time today.
Thank you so much. Always a pleasure, Win.
Absolutely.